Greetings, loved ones. Today we're going to talk about the impact of childhood trauma. These are important messages, so please help us get them out. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Hit the like button, hit the notification bell, share these messages with others. So like I said, today we're going to talk about the impact of childhood trauma on well-being. Child abuse and neglect can have lifelong implications for victims, including on their well-being. While the physical wounds heal, there are several long-term consequences of experiencing the trauma of abuse or neglect. A child or youth's ability to cope and even thrive after trauma is called resilience, and with help, many of these children can work through and overcome their past experiences. Children who are abused often are at risk of experiencing cognitive delays and emotional difficulties, among other issues. Childhood trauma also negatively affects nervous system and immune system development, putting children who have been abused at a higher risk for health problems as adults. Aside from the immediate physical injuries children can experience through abuse, a child's reactions to abuse or neglect can have lifelong and even intergenerational impacts. Childhood abuse can be linked to later physical, psychological, and behavioral consequences, as well as costs to society as a whole. These consequences may be independent of each other, but they also may be interrelated. For example, abuse or neglect may stunt physical development of the child's brain and lead to psychological problems such as low self-esteem, which later could lead to high-risk behaviors such as substance abuse. The outcomes for each child may vary widely and are affected by a combination of factors, including the child's age and developmental status when the abuse occurred, the type, frequency, duration, and severity of the abuse, and the relationship between the child and the abuser. Additionally, children who experience abuse often are affected by other adverse experiences. For example, parental substance abuse, domestic violence, and poverty, which can make it difficult to separate the unique effects of abuse. So let's talk about people who engage in child abuse or neglect. A person who commits child abuse or neglect, sometimes referred to as a perpetrator or aggressor, is a person who has been determined to have caused or knowingly allowed the abuse of a child. Most states define abusers of children and neglect as parents and other caregivers, such as relatives, babysitters, and foster parents who have harmed a child in their care. It is important to note the states define the term caregiver differently. Harm caused to a child by others, such as acquaintances or strangers, may not be considered child abuse or neglect. Rather, it may be considered a criminal matter. So let's talk about contributing factors to child abuse and neglect. There's generally not a single factor that results in the abuse or neglect of a child. It is usually a combination of various things. In addition, the duration, such as the duration of an illness, or intensity, such as the level of drug or alcohol abuse, can make it more or less likely that a child will be at risk for abuse. When trying to understand child abuse and neglect, we often look at possible factors in the adults, factors based on something in society, and factors based on something about the child. So let's begin with talking about possible societal contributing factors to abuse. There are many deeply rooted, complicated, and interrelated societal factors that can contribute to child abuse and neglect. And while we can't list all of them here, the following two factors are often identified as increasing the likelihood that child abuse and child neglect will occur. One is stresses of poverty, and the other is community violence. So now let's look at possible adult contributing factors to child abuse. Researchers tell us that there is no, quote, typical abuser. People who abuse children can be male or female, and the majority of child abuse is committed by someone who knows the child. In more than 80% of cases, a parent is the identified aggressor. So here are the following characteristics of some people who abuse children. Doesn't mean that if this is it, they definitely abuse children, but these are characteristics of the people who abuse children, and so one or more combination or series or whatever can identify that this person is possibly abusing children. Low self-esteem. An adult has poor control over their emotions. An adult has a history of being abused themselves. Adult has a great deal of stress and financial problems and social isolation. The adult has relationship problems with a partner, which may include domestic violence. The adult has a lack of parenting skills, is abusing drugs or alcohol, or the adult has a grave illness. Maybe the adult believes that too much praise or attention will spoil a child. Another thing is that an adult has the belief that fear and embarrassment are the ways to make sure children obey. Another sign is that the adult doesn't understand children's needs or abilities and criticizes children who can't meet their high expectations. The adult has a belief that children should be quiet at all times. The adult has an inability to cope with life stressors. The adult is focused on their own troubles or things other than their children. And the adult has been diagnosed or exhibits symptoms of depression. So now let's look at the children. What are the possible child contributing factors? Some children have characteristics or behaviors that make it more likely that they will be at risk for abuse or neglect. Remember, people sometimes are predators. We have predators who are looking for weaknesses in children. However, it's important to remember that no matter what characteristics a child has or how they act, a child is never responsible for being abused or neglected. So here are some signs in children. They have an illness, especially a chronic illness. They have disability. This makes them more vulnerable. Children who are crying for extended periods. Children who have feeding problems. Children who have tantrums and whine a lot. Children who bite others. Children with difficulty toilet learning. Children who frequently act with disobedience and lie. And physical appearance, for example, resembles someone who is viewed negatively by the caregiver, and poor grades can be a sign of a child who's vulnerable to abuse. According to the CDC, over half of all children in the world, 1 billion children ages 2 to 17 years, experience violence every year. The question is not if you'll encounter a victim of violence. The question before God is, what will you do when you do encounter them? You could be the person who saves a life. You are called. We are all called to be champions for justice. And those who suffer violence, they need to know that those who love them and those who don't even know them will reach out and give them the help they need before it's too late. This is important information. Please help us get these messages out. Subscribe to our channel. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and share these messages with others. If you're a victim of violence, I want you to listen to me. You are valued. The truth is, you are loved, you are intelligent, and yes, you are worthy. God does not want you to suffer violence. He wants you to live free from violence in peace and tranquility. I want you to know that you're not trapped. There is a way out, and it is not your fault no matter what anybody else says. Abuse is not love, and most of all, I want you to know you are not alone. So if you're a victim of violence, reach out to someone today. If you find yourself in a dangerous situation, call 911. And if you know of a child suffering violence, don't investigate, report it to the authorities. In our next episode, we're going to talk about why some people hurt children. Until then, God bless you.